So by now, pretty much everyone in the audience, I assume, is familiar with this Gillette ad. And you're probably familiar with the many, many woke takes by other people on the Gillette ad. If you're not familiar with it, in a nutshell, Gillette, the razor blade company, put out an ad of over a minute talking about the quote-unquote best a man can get. If you're a bit younger, you might not be familiar with those ads, but back in the day, Gillette had these ads, shaving ads, Gillette being the best a man can get for the purposes, of course, of shaving his beard. And they had a particularly woke take. They swapped everything out, and they showed images of men harassing women and engaging in violent activity, and the whole range of the so-called feminist agenda. And yeah, it's pretty stupid, and there's not much to say about that. But in this video, I really want to talk about something related, adjacent, and yet different. And that is the inability of people, both as individuals and en masse, to say no to various things. There are basically two ways of saying no to people. You can be direct about it or indirect about it. So, for example, a direct way of saying no to a child throwing a temper tantrum, say Timothy or Jennifer is throwing a temper tantrum because they can't get their candy or their toy. You say, no, you don't get that toy, you don't get the candy, whatever. That's how you might address a child. I'm sure many of you have noticed this is a somewhat more difficult endeavor, but it can be done too. For example, if there are hard and fast rules at a company that something's just not done, you say, no, you can't do that. And if a person engages in said behavior, you can also say, no, you can't do that. And then there's the no that is somewhat embodied by MGTOW's walking away. And I think really what the Gillette ad has shown us, and this speaks to many more issues, is the inability to say no. Now, where does the inability to say no to these things, whether it's the no of walking away, the no of apathy, the no of disregard, or the no of being direct, the no of saying no, you can't, where does that come from? Well, my take on it is a bit different. I call this nagging wife complex, and I say that for a number of reasons. You see, what I think is happening, whether it's Gillette or more recently this Assassin's Creed Odyssey DLC where the creative director had to come out and said, quote unquote, sorry for forcing you into heterosexual relationships. Where does all this stuff come from? Of course, it's the inability to say no to these people, but why? And I think it's fear. I think it's based on fear. So what happens if you've been married a long time and you're not in a particularly happy marriage? They are far and few between, as we know. Well, you have that nagging wife. And nagging is a specialty of women. It's a highly evolved feature they have, and it tends to work. It wouldn't be present in women's behavior if it didn't work. So nagging works, and the way it works is they annoy you as a male, your wife annoys you, until you do what she requests you to do. She makes your life difficult or a living hell. I've seen this in marriages, not my own because I've never been married, but in other marriages, of course, what happens when the wife nags and the husband offers resistance? Well, he doesn't really have a nice time of it. He tries to do his own thing. She won't let up. Eventually he caves in. Of course he has to cave in because he won't have a minute's rest or peace if he does not. Nagging is a very effective tool employed by women. And it can get to the point, if you do not comply as a husband, that the nagging makes your life a living misery. And it's not that husbands like putting up floral wallpaper in the new baby room, or they necessarily enjoy fixing things around the house, as some might, or they enjoy taking out the trash at an appointed hour. It has nothing to do with that. It's just the power of the nag, the fear of the implications and consequences. Of course, making your life a living domestic hell is, in today's atmosphere and today's environment, the least of your worries, because it goes far beyond that. If you don't, quote-unquote, please your wife and accommodate her wishes, we know what the potential legal implications of that lack of accommodation might be. And so I want to, by way of analogy, offer a different perspective, And I simply call this informed speculation. I do not think this is factual so much as it is likely. But what we're really seeing en masse, whether it's related to media, particularly games, film, YouTube, the internet more broadly, or companies, is that fear of the nagging wife. People caving in to other people's wishes, even though they're not particularly enamored of those wishes. And let's be honest, the ad, at least as much as you can see it on YouTube, was a colossal failure. It has over 1 million downvotes versus a few hundred upvotes. Who knows how artificial the upvotes are in this context. And I can only presume it was a waste of time, money, and energy creating, because it's not going to get men to buy razors, even though Gillette, I've used Gillette historically. They're good razors. There's no doubt about that. Totally irrelevant. Why would they inject this all of a sudden into this? Well, a lot of people would say it's ideology, it's cultural Marxism, it's feminism. I think the explanation is a lot simpler. I think it is the nagging wife, that is, a bunch of ideologues who unfortunately have achieved a degree of power in the current state of affairs, who are putting pressure on these people, who are saying, if you don't do this, we'll expose you as whatever, as X, and then you potentially have a PR disaster. And of course, things are getting so bad that you can have a reverse PR disaster, and you could argue that the Gillette affair is a good example of a reverse PR disaster because the reaction has not been positive. But basically, in a nutshell, my theory is that Gillette, among many, many other institutions, companies, media outlets, they're succumbing to pressure put on them, not because they believe in this stuff, but because they fear the consequences of the nagging wife. And the consequences of the nagging wife, as I've explained, are, she can make your life a living hell, living with her, dealing with her bullshit, and on top of that, these days, she can eject you from your home. She can ruin your life. She can transform your life into a living hell on earth if she so chooses. The state has empowered her to do so. But I think the fear in these companies is typically a lot greater than the consequences are. You even have companies like CD Projekt Red caving in slightly to some of these strange demands, offering apologies. I think if en masse up front these companies said, look, we're just trying to run our show and do our thing, we're not interested. But I do think there is a fair bit of credence in the fear of this nagging wife. A bunch of ideologues, not many of them, who are putting pressure on these people to do certain things they otherwise would not do. There really is, to my mind, no other explanation. I don't think Gillette historically has ever been a bunch of ideologues. I don't think they've been possessed now of this strange toxic masculinity, feminist agenda. I don't think it's a very popular strand. It's not going to sell them razors, we know that. So what else could it be? It is the fear of PR disaster, the fear of looking bad. And I would argue that even if that's the case, that's not quite as bad as living with the wife who's nagging you, making your life hell, or the wife who can eject you onto the street. It's very similar, and I do think the analogy is apt, but at the same time, I think these companies need to realize that the majority of people, I think these days, would be behind them. And the odd thing, the thing we repeatedly see, which I think is a bit interesting, is that many of the pressure makers, these nagging wives, are people that don't even engage in the activities. We all remember Anita Sarkeesian, of course. Well, she was never a gamer, never really played games, and yet she offered her quote-unquote feminist critique of gaming, feminist frequency. Perfect example of somebody who was talking about things that she had no clue about. How many feminists or gender ideologues are really interested in Gillette razors or make use of them? Maybe a few, but again, people stepping outside of their lane because they know they have traction vis-a-vis PR disasters and the fear that these PR disasters tend to instill in various companies, media outlets, etc. I think the proper way forward for all of these companies, in as much as I'm correct, and I think I probably am, although I concede I might be wrong, maybe they are fully possessed of some strange ideological belief that I personally don't think is likely, but still possible. But if they're not possessed of that, they have to realize that the broad customer base, we don't care. I'm de facto a Gillette customer. I use their razors. I don't care about that stuff. I just want razors that will help me shave my head and help me shave my face. That's really all I want. I don't have any other interest in Gillette apart from that. And as far as gaming is concerned, I just want good games that are entertaining, that are interesting. I don't care about this other stuff. I think most people are like that. It's not that we're all simple or simpletons. We just want things that have their typical normal functionality, and we're not interested necessarily in going beyond that. And I think that's perfectly fine. And if people were to stay the course, Gillette stays the course, gaming companies stay the course, more broadly, society stays the course, they would see that the power of no, and the power of no either in the form of saying no, but I think in this case, the power of no of just saying, we're not interested, we're not buying what you're selling, I think that would be far more effective going ahead than actively saying no or caving into these strange, bizarre demands these people are putting on. Because I think that's really what it boils down to. I don't think all of these people are gender ideologues or that they're gender fanatics or anything like that. I think they're just afraid of the consequences of the nagging wife. Well, yes, there might be consequences, but I think generally speaking, if people stay the traditional course of just making products that the customers are interested in, they will do fine and continue to do fine. Anyway, that is my take on the Gillette issue. I wanted to weigh in on it, somewhat different from what you might have heard. And as always, may the gods watch over you and enjoy your weekend wherever you might be. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.